And it's a good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights and tips to help you with your business challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. My guest today is a communication coach. She's also co-founder of the leading leadership development company, Bespoke Communications, and works with business leaders to help them grow their influence with the people that need to know them. I'm delighted to welcome Camilla Long to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Camilla.
Hi, Alec. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, fantastic. No, great. We've loads to talk about because you were a person who liked to travel a bit in your life. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. But as part of the format for the show, I always take people back to their last year in school. Were you the person who was adventurous? Were you the person who wanted to get into the workforce, the traveling person, or were you the academic? What was going through your mind sort of 17, 18 years of age?
Oh gosh, lots of profiles being thrown at me there, and I'm not sure which of them I might fit. I came from a family of 5, and in our house, school was important. My mother especially, supported by my father, of course, believed hugely in education. And as far as she is concerned, as long as we wanted to study, our family was going to be there to support us. So I was always going to take a step into the world of university. And, you know, Alec, when you've grown up on a farm, your universe is, from the farm to the closest town where you go to school and home again. It was time to leave that small town behind and get myself to Dublin, which was all of an hour down the road. So I went off to UCD, and there I studied computer science and maths.
Right. Okay. So you've left the farm. You're in the biggest smoke that's near to you anyway. And computer science. Why computer science? What was on your mind when you sort of picked that as a topic?
I was really lucky, actually. When I look back and I hear people talk about career guidance and the influences they had in their lives at that time. Actually, my brother only recently, in the farmhouse where I grew up, my brother now lives there, and he dug out a box of all my old stuff. In the last 2-3 years, he found this box of stuff that had belonged to me when I was at school. And in there was my career guidance booklet, the one that was given to us when we hit 5th year or 6th year, the idea of the different careers that were available to us. And I thought to myself, goodness me, what on earth am I going to say career guidance to a girls' school in the 1990s? What sort of advice is going to be given to us here? And when I opened it and I read the opening paragraph, I really couldn't believe it. Mr. Donnelly, our career guidance teacher, was just, of course, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but honestly, the paragraph that was written about the opportunities that were coming down the line with technology and with new companies coming to Ireland, it could literally have been written the year that I was reading it. So I had a really progressive set of, influences there. And one of the things that most definitely was being discussed and talked about, although I don't even remember it, but was the idea that, technology was going to play a big part in our lives, and, getting on board that whole bandwagon and understanding computers and all of that world was going to be a really good skill to have. So I was really influenced by that. And although I would say my favorite subjects at school were much more along the humanities, things like English and history and French and the languages, I ended up studying computer science and maths because it seemed like that would be a really good path to a great career. And sure enough, all these years later, although I don't directly work in the field of technology, so many of my clients come from technology, and to have an understanding of that world, I think, has been really important.
Yes, it's amazing. Things happen for a reason. But I think it's fascinating that on reflection and be able to find some record of history, you see that the seeds were sown without you realizing at the time. So a hand of influence was cast across you.
Yeah, you're right. And, when you look back, the different decisions and paths that we take through our lives, goodness me, who knows what influences were there to help us to take them. Because I studied at UCD, had a great time, loved it. And, when it came to graduating, I think there was maybe a little trend there. But, well, actually, the truth of the matter is, Alec, there was a little bit of a broken heart involved there. I had just broken up from the love of my life at the time that I graduated. And, the island of Ireland probably wasn't big enough for the both of us. So I took off for Tokyo in Japan. That was the graduate job that I opted for, which is, I don't know, is it 4,000 or 5,000 miles away? I was off. I took off. And that really, ended up being a massive influence on my life then after that.
It's interesting you're talking about, I suppose we all fall in love. Of course, we all fall in love at some stage, but if you take it at a very sort of important time in your life, but Tokyo of all places, I
Of
mean,
all
most people,
places. Yeah.
not Australia, not Canada, not the States. Why Japan?
Yeah, you're right. I'd loved languages at school and I had studied French and I'd studied German, but Japanese wasn't on the curriculum. So off I
Yeah,
went to this place and, you can't even read a newspaper without needing to learn a whole new alphabet, a whole new reading system. So it was crazy. It was bonkers. But I did go as part of a support scheme. So there was a scheme in place in Ireland at the time that supported graduates who had, wanted to take this opportunity maybe to travel to far-flung places. And a lot of it was about, it was tied in with the IDA and encouraging foreign direct
sure.
investment companies to come into Ireland. So it was kind of like a two-way thing. These companies would come and invest in Ireland, and then graduates had the opportunity to go and work for those companies in their native, wherever they came from. So my company, Mitsubishi, had a factory, had invested in Ireland, had a factory in Limerick. And
Right.
I ended up going to work for their R&D lab in Tokyo. And that was the kind of reciprocation that happened there. And anyway, off I went to Tokyo and I ended up on a flight. There were 6 of us that flew out from Dublin at the same time.
Right.
And I remember we landed and we were greeted by, honestly, the upper echelons of management within Mitsubishi. I certainly didn't appreciate how senior the executives were that came to greet us when we landed in Tokyo. They took us for lunch, Alec, and the acid test of whether you're going to last the pace was how well you could use chopsticks. I really couldn't use chopsticks very well at all. But anyway, I survived that lunch. I don't know. I managed to eat something. I managed to pick something up, get it past my lips. And 6 years of my life followed that particular moment in time.
Let's just kind of just focus on that experience just for a while. I mean, you've gone into a completely new culture. And so how do you adapt to that with a new language, which is not one of the easier ones to pick up? Working for a company, again, that has international, tentacles. Let's talk about that experience and what you learned there.
Well, I think a lot of the positives that come from that are, I'd never worked before. This was my first actual professional job. I'd had part-time jobs, but I'd never worked in a professional environment before. So you don't have any preconceived notions. You turn up and whatever you get, that's just how things are done around here. But I think that definitely helped because there was nothing to change. Everything was new. And whether I'd walked into a job in Dublin or a job in Tokyo, everything about that environment was going to be new and different. So I think that definitely helps. And there's probably a lesson for us all there, in as much as we can get kind of set in our ways and we can get kind of used to the way things that happen around here. So building that resilience and that ability to, have an open mind, I think is really important. It was absolutely facilitated by the fact that I had a mind that was completely blank. There was nothing to be worried about opening up there at all. So that was great. But the other thing I think that was huge was the idea of picking up the language so that you can tune into the people around you. If you don't understand what people are saying, you can't pick up on the nuances, you can't pick up on what people like, you can't pick up on any of that cultural stuff. So whether it's English or not, whether it's your native language or not, I think having the ability to really listen to the people around you is always going to help you to assimilate in any environment.
And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You in Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Camilla Long. And we're just talking about Camilla being in Tokyo, 6 years in Tokyo. I mean, I've met people who've been 20 years in a country and haven't learned the language. So did you become quite fluent in Japanese?
I don't think I ever reached the dizzying heights of fluency, but I certainly got to the point where I could work through Japanese. I could communicate every day.
Right.
I wouldn't have reached a formal level of Japanese. That really does require a huge investment of time. But I was able to understand a whole lot more than I could say, put it like that. But I did end up communicating on projects through Japanese. Very often I find myself in environments where nobody spoke any English. So you've got to manage then, don't you?
Yeah, and again, there's a sort of totally different work ethic in Japan, and also the sort of hierarchical systems are different
Mm.
really to what we've got here. Maybe just tell our listeners a bit about your experience of that, and of course that learning that you might have brought back with you.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I totally remember. Subsequent to leaving Japan, I moved back to London, and I remember to this day, I'll remember the very first meeting I had in London, where I walked in, and it was, well, just a meeting like probably anybody here would expect and experience. It was quite casual. I was working in the financial markets at the time, and I was meeting with a group of three people on the trading floor. So people are busy. They kind of have one eye on the markets as they're talking to you. So we ended up pulling up a chair around somebody's desk. And so there were three or four of us literally just dragging chairs across the rooms. And honestly, after coming from Japan, I must have looked like a complete fruitcake, because I stood back. I couldn't understand what was going on. When you walk into a meeting in Japan, everybody has their place around the table. So it's ranked from the most senior to the most junior, and everybody knows where they need to sit. And it's depending on who holds the power. So the client will have their defined seats. You as the vendor or the supplier will have your defined seats, and the most junior person sits closest to the door. So there's really, really defined unwritten rules around
Right.
this. And to suddenly turn up to a meeting where we were just dragging, I couldn't cope. I didn't know what to do. So it took me a while to adjust to all that, actually, believe it or not, after leaving Japan. You're right, there's a lot of structures in place in Japan, and absolutely there is a hierarchy. Probably there's some benefits there again to, not being part of that hierarchy, not being Japanese, being somebody who's quite clearly different to all that's going on around them. There was probably a little bit of othering that went on, but
Sure.
it's about finding ways to make that work for you.
It must have been interesting. What we're talking about is a culture clash here, in the sense that you've come from one sort of quite strict environment, which obviously works very well for the Japanese, and everybody knows where everybody sits, to chaos, and people
Yeah.
find their own way.
Yeah. So maybe the reverse culture shock was more challenging than the culture shock of going there in the first place.
But you adapted. I mean, you got into the world of sort of stockbroking, and why, may I ask?
Yeah. Look,
Like,
talk about, so many of these opportunities, they're not planned and they're a function of circumstance.
yeah,
I found myself in Tokyo at a time when the Japanese stock exchange was making this huge investment in end-to-end trading technology. They were ahead of anywhere else, ahead of what was going on in any other financial center, certainly miles ahead of Europe, and way ahead of what was happening even with NASDAQ and NYSE in New York.
sure.
And that, I suppose, put me ahead of what was happening in those financial centers. So I had moved into the world of technology, or I was working in the world of technology at this stage. And when there is this amount of investment, that's where the opportunities flow. So I found myself working within that sort of trading technology environment. And the opportunity came when a client came and asked if I would consider joining their front office team. So I took the exams, to become registered. And that
Right.
was where I moved then for a substantive part of my career. I became a stockbroker, really in the whole brave new world of cross-border trade flows and electronic stock market trading. It was the very beginning of what then became high frequency trading, and a whole lot of algorithmic trading that we see so much dominating the
Yeah.
markets today.
Yeah, it was interesting to be in on the ground floor of all of that, and to
Yeah.
see, that transition from old world to new world, and how technology was going to influence it. So that must have been quite informative for you.
Oh yeah, most definitely. But again, you just kind of, the opportunity presents itself. So, I enjoyed that. It was great. Spent a few years in Tokyo really thrashing out these new systems, so that by the time, my now husband and I made the decision to move back to London, well, I just had all of this knowledge that really wasn't to be found in other financial centers. So I was able to move with my client back to London and make that transition really easily.
Fantastic. Although London wasn't going to be the final pit stop on that journey of yours.
No, it wasn't. I'd spent a few years, or a number of years, I think we were in London for 10 years actually at that stage. But then when the babies came along, the bright lights didn't twinkle quite so brightly. And both Jerry and I decided we'd take the opportunity to move back to the island of Ireland. And yeah, to bring up the children, really, I suppose. I'd grown up on a farm, I'd grown up falling out of trees, I'd grown up with a lot of freedom. And I think just the constraints of a big city started to, when the children started school, it seemed like it would be a nicer lifestyle opportunity for us to move the children back to somewhere that was just a bit more free and easy. And Alec, when you think about all that's happened over the last couple of years with the pandemic and
Sure.
with trends towards hybrid working, those sorts of transitions are much easier for people to make now than necessarily they were at those times, because at that stage we were still in an environment where people were expecting 9 to 5 working patterns and physically turning up at an office. Now I think with flexible working, it's so much more straightforward for people to make those decisions and to carve out new opportunities for themselves and their families. As you hit different stages of your life, you want different things from your work.
Exactly. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Camilla Long. So Camilla, we've left the farm, we've gone to university, we've gone to Tokyo, spent 6 years immersed in the culture there, completely different, into technology. That's moved us on to London, into a sort of supercharged energy market and stockbroking. But now you've suddenly found yourself back in Ireland, bringing your children back to an environment that you grew up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you've kind of done a 360 on it. Interesting. Well, okay, we take time out for a family, but you have another career in you that you decided that, hey.
Well, that's just it. When you are completely unemployable, Alex, sometimes you just have to go out there and make your own job. So
Exactly.
look, at this stage, I did have the opportunity to go and work for, I moved to Northern Ireland and it took an amazing job, actually. It's funny, isn't it, how things just pop up, but a fabulous opportunity at Ulster University, which just gave me exposure to so much. I had an economic development role there where it was a funded project that the university had led, one of the largest actually of its kind at the time. And it just gave me exposure to such a network of individuals. And as part of that work at Ulster University, I met my now work wife, my business partner, Sarah Travers. At the time, she was working as a BBC news anchor, and she had a little bit of a hankering to get into the whole world of learning and development and supporting people with training, because in her role as a journalist, she very often uncovered amazing stories, but found a huge reluctance, amongst certain people to come and share their story, or, the minute a camera was stuck in their face, it was like, it was like a light bulb being turned off. So she really wanted to help people with the confidence to go on camera and share their story. And I suppose when we met, I was running a large learning development program at Ulster University, and there was a kind of a complementary skill set there. And that was over 7 years ago now. We came together and set up Bespoke Communications, and it's been a journey for us developing that business over the time, and really, more than anything else, responding to where our clients' needs are at. We've developed and grown and learned and developed so much in that time, and our business is unrecognizable today from when we set it up 7 years ago.
We're going to kind of go down into that and what you offer your clients, but I just want to talk about partnerships. A lot of people sort of ask me, I was in a business partnership for 25 years. I'm very successful, never had one row, I can honestly say, in that, and we're still the best of friends. You connect with somebody. How did you find that? Sometimes you're complementary. We have both different skills you bring to the party.
Yeah, well, sometimes it takes somebody else to see that. And we were introduced, Sarah and I were introduced, we had met, we had lovely conversations, great chats, lovely times over coffee. But really, the business idea, neither of us particularly thought about it. It was a mutual friend who sort of suggested that maybe our interests might be aligned. And it was a little bit like a light bulb going off, so the power of friendships, the power of networks, the power of wisdom being around you. And we sat down and we thought, maybe we should give this a go. And we gave it a year. We said, well, let's try it for a year and see what happens. And, Alec, when I look back on that first year and, the time that we invested going around to visit prospective clients, we spent more time in the car, more time drinking tea and eating buns with, I felt like half of Northern Ireland at the time, than we did actually delivering a service. And so by the end of the year, we kind of looked at one of them and thought, you know, we've definitely had some green shoots here. We've had some really great projects, but is there a living in it? But
Yeah.
it seemed as though literally just after having had all those conversations over that 12-month period, that literally everything came together and suddenly the phone was ringing off the hook. I suppose one of the things that I probably wouldn't recommend anybody else does when they set up a business is, you know, not to have any clients. We started a business with no clients, and you know, had to spend a year really drumming up business, where it's probably easier to start off with your anchor client in place. That would be one piece of advice I would give anybody who is going out into business.
I mean, you certainly, I was going to say started with greenfield, you probably started with a brownfield, you know.
Yeah, we had to plow the field, we had to sow the seeds, and we had to wait for the grass to grow.
Yeah.
And luckily we'd given it about a year, and that was literally the point at which the grass did thankfully start to grow. And yeah, from that stage onwards, we've just grown and developed, and we have some fabulous clients that have been with us since that day, and we've grown alongside them. So, I mean, one of our early clients, and I speak about them all the time, was a fabulous e-learning company based in Derry called Learning Pool. And they were always amazing. They were always progressive. They were always forward thinking and forward looking. At the time that we met them, I think they had a team of about 60 people. And now in the world of e-learning, you can just imagine how that has exploded over recent times, and certainly over the whole idea of digital transformation during the pandemic. Learning Pool now have 500 people located in, I can't name the number of countries now, but they have 6 or 7 offices all around the world, and are supporting massive clients like the International Olympic Committee, the Football Association, every household brand that you can imagine. And so with clients like that, where you come in to do one job, and as they grow, you get stretched and developed and need to evolve your services. That's been really the heart of our growth, growing organically alongside clients like that, who believe in what it is that you stand for, and want you to come and support them.
Yeah, and I think you're mentioning something which is very, very important, and this is how you build relationships. Firstly, the first relationship is with your potential business partner, and spending so much time together, touring around, you got to know each other and your sort of strengths and weaknesses. But the other piece, which I think is more interesting, is you're building a relationship with clients, which is more a symbiotic relationship as opposed to client, you know, provider relationship.
Yeah, and that's really where the world is at. I think nowadays it's really difficult to be in that kind of, you know, you talk about Japan being a very hierarchical structure. We've really moved away from that. And, you know, for most suppliers to be able to deliver a good service to their customers, it is about understanding their customers' needs and really embedding themselves and becoming indispensable. The more you learn about your customer, the more you understand their culture, the more you, across every industry, you know, we happen to be in learning and development, but I think it would be the same if you're providing printing services or logistics services or whatever it might be. The more you can understand about your client, the more that you can become invaluable to that client, and that pushes you on and helps you to develop and grow as well.
I suppose one of the things that you have learned over the years is, I mean, there's a changing requirement of clients. What do you find typically your clients are looking for these days? You know, what are the services you're providing and that are gaining the most traction?
Well, when we started out first, we were very much focused on communication, presentations, how to put the best foot forward, how to communicate for impact. And whilst that hasn't changed, I think there's been an evolution to that. And there is a much greater focus on those blurred boundaries between work and home. And the whole idea of authentic communication is key. So the ability to stand up and present and to be vulnerable. And that applies across, you know, leadership of companies needing to motivate teams to, you know, developing that symbiotic relationship between a client and a supplier, where you're both able to have quite open conversations about where the strengths and weaknesses lie. But I would say, if you're to ask me what the one single thing that companies are needing to work with their teams on at the moment, it really comes down to supporting people through overwhelm. We're definitely in, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about the external environment, but we're definitely in a world where people bring their whole selves to work now, and people are grappling with so much at home, be that the challenge of aging parents, or maybe the challenge of children with additional needs, or or, a cost of living crisis or identity related issues. There's just so much going on for your teams right now that actually as leaders, it's about tuning in and listening to that and working out the best way to support people through that in order to motivate them to deliver the high performance that we're expecting. I mean, gone are the days where you left your family at the door when you walked into the office, especially now that we're working in a hybrid environment. So there's an awful lot for people to get their heads around. And at work, it's such a changing work environment. We've seen unprecedented change over the last, never mind 3 years, the last 1 year, where supply chain shocks have been prevalent, and there's been such structural changes within industry with digital transformation that people's heads are ready to explode. And the only way that you'll get the best out of your teams is by supporting them through that. So I think a lot of resilience is required. A lot of really important, powerful communication is required, a lot of listening, a lot of tuning in, and a lot of having the courage to put things in place and to back them is needed. So supporting people with all of those things is the stuff of every leadership program that we run at the moment.
Believe it or not, in the last minute that we've got, can you give our listeners maybe one quick tip, and then how to get in contact with you and your company?
Right. Goodness me, to summarize all of that. Well, I think my biggest tip is to listen, to learn how to be a great listener. I think no matter what we've got to say, it's all about tuning into the people around us and making sure that we're meeting their needs, be they your own team or be they clients. So I think learning to be a good listener is a skill that will carry you really far. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I can be reached on bespokecoms.net. That's COMMS.net. And all of our socials will be, you can see them all up on our website.
Well, a special thank you to our guest today, Camilla Long, for coming into the You and Your Business studio. Thanks also to Sam on Sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 1 o'clock, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.